Over the last 4 years, for example, we've seen bomb threat campaigns targeting hospitals who offer trans healthcare and targeting children's schools where right-wing agitators have pointed out gay teachers or pride flags. We've seen anti-abortion groups harassing and blocking women from entering women's health clinics. School board meetings in Florida are veritable war zones now because parent groups are there fighting against school board members or over books that teach African American and LGBTQ history.
2 out of 3 Americans say they're concerned that political violence could follow the November election rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Trump. That's according to a new Reuters Ipsos poll. The survey found widespread concerns that the US could see a repeat of the unrest that followed Trump's 2020 election defeat when thousands of his followers stormed the US Capitol building. Well, let's run this by Andy Campbell, who is a senior editor at HuffPost and author of We Are Proud Boys: How a Right-Wing Street Gang Ushered in a New Era of American Extremism. Andy, hello to you.
Hello to you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. If you listen to many Republicans on Capitol Hill, they say we need to move on. We need to move on. That shouldn't have happened. But, we've got to look ahead. We've got to consider the choice facing the country between Joe Biden's car crash and Trump, where people felt much better, much richer. But if you look at this poll, well, the majority of Americans haven't forgotten what happened on January the 6th, 2021, and they fear something as bad or worse could happen.
Right. Well, if they want to move on from January 6th, then perhaps their nominee for Republican as president should move on from it. Trump has repeatedly in his own criminal trial stated that, he did win the election. He stated repeatedly that he will pardon those arrested, the more than 1,000 sentenced already over the violence that day at the Capitol. And in April, he was asked directly, what do you think is going to happen political violence-wise this election? And he said, quote, if we don't win, it depends. So this is a guy who hasn't moved past it at all. And certainly what we're seeing, the researchers and reporters covering extremism in America, none of the spirit of January 6th has gone anywhere. The extremist violence that leads up to an event like that continues to this day.
Where are you seeing it? Where should we be looking for it at the moment? You say it's not gone away. What's the evidence?
Right. Well, I like to say that an event like January 6th or the event that preceded it, the neo-Nazi rallies in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, these are the cresting of a wave of extremism. This is not an isolated swelling of violence that happened. A bunch of extremist events preceded it. Over the last 4 years, for example, we've seen bomb threat campaigns targeting hospitals who offer trans healthcare and targeting children's schools where right-wing agitators have pointed out gay teachers or pride flags. We've seen anti-abortion groups harassing and blocking women from entering women's health clinics. School board meetings in Florida are veritable war zones now because parent groups are there fighting against school board members or over books that teach African American and LGBTQ history. This is an ongoing extremist political violence campaign that we have in this country. And this always leads up to a January 6th style event. Now, will it look like January 6th? Will it look like a storming of the Capitol? We'll see. But for those Americans that are worried about the political violence happening after the election, they should be worried about the political violence happening right now.
Right.
It hasn't stopped.
And Andy, you've made a special study. I mean, you've written a book about We Are Proud Boys. But in the wake of January the 6th, haven't many of the Proud Boy leaders and Oath Keeper leaders and 1776 guys been jailed or been, I suppose, put back in their box?
Certainly. I mean, a lot of the leaders of the Proud Boys are going to be behind bars for more than 20 years apiece. They were convicted of seditious conspiracy alongside the Oath Keepers. But the mission of the Proud Boys, which was to normalize political violence in everyday American politics, that was a success. And so now, even if the Proud Boys, if the heads cut off the snake here, you have everyday Americans willing to use violence as an option in politics. And so that's why when you go to a school board meeting in Florida where they're talking about LGBTQ rights, you might see regular everyday Americans in body armor and military fatigues and guns. You know, even 3 weeks ago, there was a new study from 3 weeks ago. 40% of local election officials surveyed report threats or abuse. We are, certainly going to see that kind of abuse that we saw in 2020 at the polls this election season. And so it's not as if the Proud Boys are the only ones there. It's everyday Americans now, and that's really what's concerning to us.
And Andy, in the wake of January the 6th, I remember talking to a number of American commentators who said, look, our system was stress tested, but the guardrails held. Okay, we have a separation of powers. The guardrails held. What makes you think they might not hold this time if there is violence after the November election?
Well, it depends on what you see as guardrails, because I mean, we have incarcerated more than 1,000 people after January 6th, and yet many of the actors and the money and the people behind January 6th continue on with the conspiracy theories, with the attacks, with the threats. And so, there's a deeper rooted issue than just being able to respond immediately to a big swelling of violence. There are deep-seated issues of political violence and extremism here, and everyone from law enforcement to Congress has yet to respond to that in any real significant way.
What's stopping them, Andy? What's stopping them? Is it because, in the case, for example, of Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, they're too nervous about being accused of weaponizing the Justice Department? Is that why they're on the back foot? Because some people, I've spoken to some Democrats who are frustrated about this.
Yeah, there is an element of that, and Trump, for his part, has done a really good job at sort of casting his trial, his own criminal trials, and the criminal trials against the January 6th defendants as these political prisoners. They're being attacked by Joe Biden, when in reality, the people that started this investigation, the law enforcement officials that are going after Trump are some of Trump's own appointees. And so there is a fear there, and we need to get rid of it. And we also need to look at extremism from the ground level and see all of these little events as tied together, which is something that we just haven't done at the law enforcement and congressional level yet.
Okay. Andy Campbell, senior editor at HuffPost and author of We Are Proud Boys, How a Right-Wing Street Gang Ushered in a New Era of American Extremism. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio. We've got a number of texts in. Dominic says, why do so many Americans fear post-election violence? Could it be due to the frightening dress rehearsal that Trump initiated on January the 6th and the fact that he still denies the fact that he lost the election? I think Andy answered that, Dominic. Yeah, I think you got your finger on it there. Penny says, evening, Henry. Farage has been promised a nice ambassadorship by Trump. Betcha. Who knows? And then Stephen says, Farage says he's off to America to help Trump. However, last election, he stood down all his candidates. He says to stop Corbyn. I say to help his Tory friends. Remember his visit to their conference. Yes, indeed. Who could forget that, Stephen?